When we get a chance to spend some time with Mark Steyn, we make the most of it. He's on the line with us right now. Mark, good morning to you.
Hey, good to be with you guys again.
Good to be with you again. You know, we're your fanboys here in Rockford. You know, we have the posters on the back of our closets. Everything that you write, we read. We wonder what you're doing late at night. Things like that.
That's great. I love it. I'm like the David Cassidy to you.
Oh yeah, the Farrah Fawcett poster went down. The Mark Steyn poster went up.
Okay, I love it. I'll send you a monogram thong. That's
excellent.
Mark, the new book, The Undocumented Mark Steyn. Don't say you weren't warned. Available now, and you're not lying when you say you're America's favorite undocumented guest host when you fill in for Rush. If people don't know, you were born in Canada. You are a Canadian citizen. So, unfortunately, before we get to the book, we have to get to yesterday's big news. This terror attack in Ottawa. I know you were doing tons of TV and radio yesterday, and as you wrote, getting angrier as the day went on. How are you the morning after?
Yeah, I'm still angry because I don't think the price that these guys are demanding of us is worth it, and I feel sadder and sadder when I see the last photographs taken of this corporal from the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, who was standing ceremonial guard at the National War Memorial. There was a lady from California, I happened to see this on Twitter, who was in Ottawa, I think it was over the weekend on Sunday, and asked if she could have her picture taken with him, as people do, and then tweeted about this handsome Canadian soldier in his kilt that she'd had her photograph taken, and it's just heartbreaking. And there is nothing that these guys have to offer that is worth the loss of Corporal Nathan Cirillo and the other people, or drummer Lee Rigby on the streets of Woolwich, or the 14 people who died at Fort Hood because Major Hassan had given a PowerPoint presentation on what he planned to do to these people, but the entire U.S. military establishment looked the other way, agreed to look the other way, because it disturbed their multicultural pieties to actually listen to what Major Hassan was telling him he was going to do. They're consistent in their message. I've had enough of it. I just don't want my children to grow up having to live with savages wrecking civil life in Western society, so that we have to go through more and more metal detectors, more and more barricades, rather than just drive a stake through this hideous ideology that is infecting young men in the Western world, like the Ebola virus. It's exactly the same thing. It comes from a particular corner of the planet, but this guy yesterday, and the fella in Moore, Oklahoma, and the Nigerian Christians who hacked the guy to death in London, all these people are converts. And as I said, they're not converting to a religion, they're converting to a violent, toxic, imperialistic ideology. They're not motivated by a sense of the divine or by some spiritual... It's not Saul on the road to Damascus that is responsible for their conversion.
Spending some time with the great Mark Steyn. So what do we do? How do we shore ourselves up defensively? What's the mindset we need to change ourselves to? And should kudos be given to the Canadian government for at least not coming out and saying workplace violence, saying terrorism?
Yes, I think that's true. That and actually that is an appalling reflection on the world we live in. That actually Stephen Harper was very clear. He went out. He called this guy a terrorist. He called it terrorism. Because that's what it is. It's designed to terrorize. It's designed to take a peaceful society and have people living in fear and cowering. And that's better than the usual soporific drone that the president gave yesterday, where he always looks as if someone's shot an elephant dart into his butt. I mean, a bit of you quoted my bit that I spent the day getting angrier and angrier. A bit of righteous indignation from this guy wouldn't come amiss once in a while. But he was, again, using these eunuch phrases like senseless violence. It's not senseless. When you put a bullet through the symbols of the state, like the War Memorial and Parliament, it's not senseless at all. It's very purposeful. You're sending a message, and when the president comes out and looks like he's been heavily sedated and drones about senseless violence, I mean, at some point you have to wonder what it is you have to do to get that guy's attention and get him not to use senseless phrases like senseless violence.
Mark Steyn with us here. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Kind of jumping off of Riley's question, what are we doing wrong that youth in the West look at YouTube videos and say, this is a good life for me. I want to fly, take a flight and join ISIS. Or I see this YouTube video. I like what I see. I think I'll start doing it at home. Are we not being clear enough? Are we not calling terror and calling evil out for what it really is? Is that one of the major problems?
Well, I think we're enchained by this kind of non-judgmentalism, Scott. I mean, I think that is part of the problem. But we don't celebrate our culture. We are the inheritors of the grand, glorious tradition of Western civilization. That is to say, Rome and Athens and Jerusalem and Magna Carta, and we are the civilization that built the modern world. Now, you don't learn it at school. You just learn that we're the guys who are responsible for colonialism and oppression and racism and all the wickedness in the world, killing the planet with capitalism, so we've got all this climate change and global warming. And if you got off the boat at the Mayflower, Plymouth Rock, a bazillion years ago, maybe you're secure enough in your sense of yourself not to feel hollowed out by all that sort of cultural relativism. But some people, when they go looking for identity, will take up global warming. They'll take up climate change. Mm-hmm. Or they'll just go and be Justin Bieber fans, or they'll be Mark Steyn fans, like you two guys.
Absolutely.
But other people, when they're looking for identity, will suddenly stumble on a jihadist website, and they'll think, oh, this is really the coolest gang on the planet. And I said this a long time ago, and I'm supposed to be, plugging my new book, but I'll plug my old book, America Alone. I've got a thing in there. I'm talking about some guy who was a white supremacist in England who decided to convert to Islam. And people couldn't figure this out, and it's very simple. He was a white supremacist, but once he'd thought about it, he figured that the important bit about that was not the white bit, but the supremacist bit. And so he converted to Islam, and he became part of the coolest gang on the planet. And that's what this guy in Ottawa did. That's what the guy in Moore, Oklahoma did. That's what the guy in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu in Quebec did. That's happening too with these three girls from Denver who are in Denver. Mm-hmm. You're in Denver, but you think you'd much rather go and live in some hideous, backward ISIS camp in the middle of Iraq just because it's cool. It gives you a sense of who you are.
So, I'm afraid of your answer, but I think I might know where you're going to go with it. How much more of this are we going to have to endure before we galvanize?
Well, judging from there are stories, for example, that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are belatedly rounding up, I think, 100 guys who are known to have joined ISIS. And if that's true, it's a very good sign, because that actually is treason. I think it's not something we would have tolerated in previous societies. Major Hassan is guilty of treason. He wore the U.S. uniform, but he was fighting for the other side, and he should have been hanged for treason, which is what most societies in human history would have done. But instead, the Obama administration prosecuted him for workplace violence or whatever it was, and took longer. Even though he said he did it, they took longer to convict him than the period of time from Pearl Harbor to VJ Day. In other words, longer than America fought it now takes longer than America fought the Second World War to convict one guy of workplace violence when he says he did it. And we should start thinking about bringing back and taking seriously concepts like treason, because the idea that they kill soldiers at Fort Hood and in Ottawa and in London to tell accountants and farmers and kindergarten teachers that if we can kill your soldiers, the people who are supposed to keep you safe, then nobody is safe. They've got a strategy and we have none.
Mark Steyn is with us. It's Ronnie and Scott on WROK. The new book is out, The Undocumented Mark Steyn. You can find it at steinonline.com, STEYN online.com. Get an autographed copy there. Or you can also see and meet Mark at the Freedom Summit. We've been giving away some tickets to the Freedom Summit, which is happening Friday and Saturday. Renaissance Schaumburg, he'll be there for that event, too. It's a compilation of, past 10, 15 years of your best work in your columns and in your monologues. I want to ask, I've been reading you for a long time, dating back to when you were in the Sun-Times. I grew up in Chicago, read you in the Sun-Times. Right. There's a quality to your work that is not inherent in everyone's writing, and that is when I read you, I hear your voice in my head, literally reading your work, and not everyone has that.
No, we talk about that all the time. How we do hear you when we read you.
There's a quality that you have where when you put pen to paper, it is exactly what you want. I think. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I hear you coming through everything you write. Is that apparent to you when you go about writing a column, writing something, writing a book, even too?
Yeah, well, I always think you should do that, in part because otherwise writing is too difficult. And I don't give a lot of advice about writing, but I like when I read in the old days. When I wrote for say the National Post of Canada or the Australian, and I'm in a coffee shop the following morning. Opening the paper and saying, "Oh, there's a great column here by Mark Steyn," and I start to read it. I'm like you guys. I like to hear it in my voice, and so if it doesn't have that rhythm or whatever, then I think you've done it wrong. I think in part if you don't do that, then writing is just too difficult. If you try to write in Charles Krauthammer's voice or George Will's voice or whoever, you can't really do that. So I'm like you guys, and so if I'm sitting if I'm in the National Post of Canada and I'm sitting in a coffee place in Montreal reading it the following morning and it doesn't sound like me, I immediately call the publisher and demand he has the editor fired because he's obviously bunkered with that. And you'd be surprised, actually, going through and picking out, because this book is really like my kind of Bohemian Rhapsody and my kind of My Way, and my kind of I Will Always Love You. It's like my greatest hits, as I see it. And but you'd be surprised, the ones that didn't make the book are the ones that didn't pass that test, because I read it back and it sort of didn't quite work on the terms you guys said it should.
Now, do you ever get heated emails, tweets, contact? Because I've heard Rush say before that when he's on, he gets talking about golf too much, or he talks about his cat too much. The stick to the issues crowd just climbs all over him. You got people where you write something extensively about theater or arts and culture, and they're yelling at you, "Hey, get back to politics."
I know. It's a funny thing because you write this material because you write about the stuff you want to write about. There are some people who want me to write about what I think is going to happen in the New Hampshire Senate race, and they open up their browser and I'm writing about James Bond, or I'm writing about G.I. Joe, or all kinds of things, and they say, hey, I've got no interest in this. Why don't you do something I want to write? Well, wait, hang on a minute. You're a brain surgeon. I don't yell at you. Hey, I'm not interested in you talking about golf. I want you to come over and perform a frontal lobotomy on me. Everybody needs what Dennis Healey, who was a former British Chancellor of the Exchequer and actually a disaster who would reduce Britain to a third world basket case in many ways. But he had a great line that politicians need a hinterland, as he called it. In other words, yes, you're interested in interest rates and foreign policy and that kind of stuff, but you need the 7/8 of the iceberg, where you have an interest, like Rush, you have an interest in sports, and you have an interest in movies, and you have an interest in other stuff, because that's the real world. That's where people live. I remember Bob Dole campaigning in the New Hampshire primary in the year 1996, and he's visiting a New Hampshire middle school, and some agonized schoolgirl, 8-year-old schoolgirl who's been scared to death by all this baloney about global warming, asks him what he's going to do about global warming. And Bob Dole looks at this 9-year-old girl and he says, "That bill's in markup." And she's...
What?
That poor kid is 26 now, and she still won't be voting for Bolton. And because that's not a human being. That's not where real people live.
Mark Steyn with us. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. I know you got to run here in a minute, but people can get the new book, The Undocumented Mark Steyn. Don't Say You Weren't Warned. SteynOnline.com, or bookstores too. But Steyn Online, while you're there, you can buy mouse pads, mugs, the Christmas album, or
Thongs.
Thongs, maybe, or gift certificates too to help you too. The free speech lawsuit, so important with Dr. Michael Mann from Penn State, and the gift certificates are a good way to help you out with that. What can you tell us? How is that progressing right now? That lawsuit.
Well, that case will be. I'm hoping that there is global warming, because I'm so sick of this interminable lawsuit where this global warming guy is suing me. I would rather the planet fried and the oceans rose and drowned Washington, D.C. and swept away the District of Columbia Superior Court. That is likely to happen before this thing ever comes to trial. It's an expensive business, and that little New Hampshire middle school girl that Bob Dole spoke to, for all I know, she's probably a pro bono lawyer working for Michael.
I was going to say, she's helping out with the case.
Yeah, so God rot her and buy a gift certificate from me to help her. But no, I'm proud to say that I think the case is actually going pretty well. From my point of view, and I'm looking forward to having some stuff about that in the next book I write.
See, we're going to go home from the show today. We're going to look at our posters of you in the back of the closet door and go, "Yep, today was a good day." Mark, thanks a lot for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Look forward to another opportunity at your earliest convenience.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.